My name is Linda Higgins. I'm the Hennepin County Commissioner representing District 2, which includes the Golden Valley and Minneapolis portions of the Bottineau line. Let me take the opportunity to welcome you and to thank you for all your work you've done over the last 3 days and leading up to it as well. There's so much to learn, there's so much to see, there's so much to do. And this is a process that can give a bit of a roadmap to how we go about doing that. It also gives an opportunity for people to meet somebody who they may not have met before, even though they might just live right down the road, and be very interested in the same subjects and have the same goals in mind. So again, thank you, and I hope we have a good evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Lee. Mary Lee, yes, Mary Lee. I thought I had that right.
That's right.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Well, thank you all for being here. I know for some of you, we've seen you a lot this week, and we really, really appreciate that. I'm Marilee Utter. I have the honor of chairing the panel this week. I'm actually from Denver, and I have a company. I've done a lot of work in Minneapolis over the years. I do advisory work on transit-oriented development, public-private partnerships. I've worked extensively through the U.S. and around the world on that, but had the pleasure to work here on several of your lines as well. So it's good to be back and look at the enormous potential of this Bottineau corridor. Let me start out, for those of you that don't know the Urban Land Institute, by just kind of introducing who we are. ULI is a global nonprofit headquartered in Washington, D.C., over 40,000 members. And our mission is really building thriving communities worldwide. We do that through a lot of research, education, publications you may have seen. And one of our hallmark programs is our advisory panels. We have offices in 75 cities around the world. And here, ULI Minnesota is one of the most powerful and most effective offices we have anywhere. They obviously have built a great reputation in this community, are an important player in bringing the community together. And they have also done a lot of these advisory panels. These technical assistance panels have a few hallmarks that are the same for all. First of all, we bring together a panel of people who are unbiased. We really push to give just our honest opinion without political influence. It's an interdisciplinary panel, and so I can assure you there's a lot of give and take and back and forth. And everybody volunteers their time and their energy and their expertise. So it's a special opportunity to hear from people you can't normally hire. These are people that are experts in their profession and come together because of the ULI belief in community. Let me go over quickly the process we followed for this panel and pretty much what we do on all of them. First of all, there was a lot of planning beforehand with the BTIC and the various communities along the corridor, trying to determine what are the issues that are appropriate for us to address. There's been so much good work done already. That led to the development of some 4 specific questions, then preparation of background materials, and I thank you again. We had lots of homework to look at before we came. Once we got here, we did a bus tour and toured the entire corridor and looked at all the station areas. We did stakeholder interviews with many of you. Thank you, that was invaluable, and others. We had a reception where we met even more people, did a TOD presentation to kind of cover the basics of transit-oriented development. Then the panel went into deliberations to come up with their recommendations and findings. And then today's presentation, and there'll be a written report in about a month. So the questions, the 5 questions we were asked was, what are the development and market opportunities and the barriers at the station areas and for the corridor as a whole? And then we were given 5 station areas to look at specifically. What are the city and county tools? What's the role of the public sector here to implement and get the right kind of development? Then how do we how do we best prevent resident and business displacement, a big concern, not only here but around the country. What are the top 2 priorities for each city? This was hard for us because I know it's hard for you as well, but we also know that there's so many things on your plate in the public sector that try to give you a priority of do this first, most important as we see it. And then what if you didn't do anything? What if you just believed that the transit would take care of everything and the cities didn't have, and the counties didn't have to do anything? So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So let me introduce the panelists. I introduced myself, but we also have Cecile Bedore, who is the Executive Vice President of Common Bond. She's well known in this community for a lot of her work and many of her roles, including her roles with St. Paul. David Higgins is VP of Development for McGuff Development, one of the most respected and largest developers in this region, a real asset to us. Joe Paris is Real Estate Development Manager for Ryan Communities, also really formidable developer working in this corridor already. Jonathan Sage Martinson, CEO of SPEDCO, a regional economic development group, and also well known because of his background also in St. Paul. Taylor Cooper, a development manager and development operation leader for Thor, also a very thoughtful construction and development company in this region, and kind of brought fresh eyes to the region. She's only been here about a year, came here from the East Coast. We also have Matthew Lieber, who is a senior strategic investment officer with LISC and comes to us from the state of New York. He'll talk a little bit more about that. And Doug Pierce, who is AIA lead. He was our sustainability conscience for the thing, but also a wonderful designer and systems thinker from Perkins and Will, where he's had a very impressive career over a long number of years around the country. So it's a very diverse, interdisciplinary panel, and as I said earlier, we had a lot of back and forth, I can assure you of that. So let me take you through the agenda of what we're going to cover today, how we're going to organize it. I'm going to make some initial observations. Then we'll talk about the big corridor, big ideas, because there are many pervasive themes that we saw at all the stations and throughout the corridor. Then we'll talk about mitigating business and resident displacement, also a corridor-wide concern. Then we'll launch into each of the 5 corridors, and I'll wind it up with a few closing thoughts, and then we'll look forward to a conversation with you through questions and answers. So let me just start out by saying how impressed and excited we are about the Botnow corridor. I mean, you've had a lot of work done, you've had a lot of studies, you know, we appreciated that. But this group brings more of a business and a development perspective than perhaps you've had before. And from where we sit and what we saw, we think you have tremendous assets to build on in this corridor that are already in demand, and that the transit will be a nice addition, but it's not essential, that there's a lot to go on. So we're very excited, and I would say more bullish than we heard from most of the people we interviewed with. We love the diversity of your community. We love the diversity of the workforce that's available. Every major corporation in America is looking for a diverse workforce and trying to recruit for it and train for it and so on, and you've got it. You've also got the attainable land for the businesses to locate here, for small businesses, for entrepreneurs. There's places to go. It's not built out or so expensive that it's beyond consideration. And then you've also got affordable housing for employees, so people can live close to where they work and where, you know, in their community. That's a rare combination, and it offers enormous opportunity. So we think of it as the opportunity corridor as much as anything. As I said, the transit will enhance it, it will expedite it, but it's not your defining feature. And you should not expect the transit to take care of everything, because believe me, it will not. You've got to build on who you are. It's not transit-oriented development, it's development around the transit. And the development comes to the community, and particularly to the public sector, to lead that. We expect these markets to come faster and to push you. You want to be ready and you want to get ahead of it. So it's a really critical time for the public sector to own their role in setting the long-term vision and to step up and get active. If there's a delay in the train, so what? That time will go fast and you need it to put in the infrastructure, establish the leadership, make sure you know what you want and what you will do to get it. Let me turn it over now to Doug to talk about the big picture and what we saw in the corridor as a whole. And let me also thank the work of Hennepin County and the Community Works and also McKnight Foundation, who really made this possible. Doug?
Thank you, Marilee, and thanks for the great introduction and sort of framing all the topics. And I think everybody on the panel really agreed that there was just a lot of opportunity here. So what I want to do is just tease up some of the big ideas that came out of this panel, and these folks are going to go into more detail over the next 35, 40 minutes. So let me just pull up a few things here. One of the big things that really stuck with us was the idea that this is a jobs, training, and transit corridor, and we're actually suggesting that you claim that and brand it, right? Really make that something that you could take out to the rest of the world. And the image that you're looking at on the screen is a project in Victoria, British Columbia that my firm worked on. And what it is an image of combined mixed-use retail, commercial, housing, and small production. And it's about revitalizing the port area of Victoria, British Columbia. And it brings all those things together into one space. And there's a lot of opportunity for you to do those types of things on your corridor. So we sort of rolled up our ideas under three big recommendations, and that's for you to think in terms of preserving, enhancing, and being adaptive. And really all the things that you're going to hear over the next 35, 40 minutes are really about those kinds of topics. So on the preservation side, we'd really encourage you as a community, as a government body, as staff, as citizens to engage in optimizing your housing supply and demand, and also to engage in optimizing the commercial retail supply, right? Don't stand back. Change is coming. You need to engage. And you want to utilize all of the tools that are available to you. Matt's going to go through some tools. Other folks will talk about some tools. And we've highlighted one here, and that's TIF, tax increment financing. That's kind of your first tool. And we had one idea that really came to the top, and that's to use TIF for demonstration projects around both commercial and residential to prove out types and rents, so you can kind of set yourself up for the future. And you can also use that not just for new construction, but also for rehab of your existing affordable retail, commercial, residential topics. So you don't want to forget that. That's a whole element that you can use. The other one is, and you've probably heard this, that the corridor is just this great opportunity for production-oriented job zone, right? You've got well-priced land, a shortage of jobs, a workforce, and what we really want to recommend is that you as a set of communities come together and work together across the corridor as a collective whole and synergize your activities. You're going to be much more influential, you're going to be much more successful if you do that. And you can utilize the existing talent you have, and you've got great training that's developing and on the corridor. You've got the college, you've got Hennepin Tech, Summit Academy in Minneapolis. There's a new one coming online, the Minneapolis Apprentice and Training Center, also in Minneapolis. That's a green jobs program. And we want you to focus on maintaining your small business local products. If you do a development, make sure they're front and center and encourage entrepreneurs. You can do that by zoning for mixed use, small production, make it space, etc. And really out of all this, you need a joint economic development strategy. And with that, you need a person or an individual that works across all the communities to help bring that together and focus attention on that. So the last one, be adaptive. Be prepared for economic change, social change, and climate change. And there's change coming no matter what happens. The train is a positive force, channel that. And along with that, you've been engaged with your communities, stay engaged. Don't lose that engagement. They've given you input, you've talked with them, now there's sort of a phase of implementing the train. Don't surprise them with suddenly, oh, here it is. Stay engaged with them. And then another one is there's a lot of change going on in retail. So you want to make sure it's an opportunity. And what we're all seeing across the country is that large retail centers, shopping plazas, et cetera, are starting to convert themselves over to mixed use. And this has to do with the online dynamics. So that's changing the whole face of retail, and it's going to change for a while. So one thing we've highlighted is the connection between online and brick and mortar. That seems to be one of the things that's successful, and you'd want to encourage all your retailers to engage in that. So one really big sort of thing, and Marley touched on this, is if you engage early, your communities can shape the change and control your destiny. If you just stand back, the markets will eventually control your destiny, and they will change you in the way that they want you to change. And you want to be in control of that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about displacement.
Speaking for Doug and myself, I think we're all looking forward to the Buffalo Bills just massacring the Vikings this weekend. And I just want to thank you all for your support ahead of time. So I want to start. I want to start this section of the talk with a little bit of a step back and a wake-up call, and that's that displacement and gentrification concerns from your existing residents are real, right? And whether or not currently on a macro level, your particular municipalities, gross housing stock is affordable to a certain percentage of the AMI. If you look through your statistics, and it's not universal, but it's pretty close to universal, the majority of renters in several of the municipalities along this corridor are significantly rent burdened, regardless of what we would deem on a market basis as affordable. So if your current residents can't afford to live in their current apartment, you have an affordable housing issue, whether or not you're acknowledging that currently. So there are, and it's only going to get worse, right? As people age in place, as people on fixed incomes have those incomes stay flat or stagnant, while utility costs, home ownership costs, rental costs rise, you are really going to see that problem exacerbate for the people who are aging in place and the most vulnerable populations that are currently residing in your communities. Beyond all of that, just from an economic imperative standpoint, companies who are relocating, growing their business, who are looking to expand, they are increasingly demanding of their municipalities that they provide affordable workforce housing for the people that they're planning on bringing into the area. To the extent that you cannot meet that need, you are driving yourself out of competitiveness in that regard. So it's really up to all of us to handle success and manage that growth in a way that serves our existing residents today and helps us build for the future. Preparing is really important. You're going to start seeing upward pressures on rents, both on the commercial side and on the residential side, as more and more people are attracted into your community. This is not only going to put a stress on your low-income residents, but it's going to put a stress on your small business and your retail footprint in your communities. Keep in mind that anytime you build new commercial along this corridor, you're going to be, in most instances, emptying out commercial from somewhere else. So you need to have a plan in place not only to address how are we going to renovate, bring in new investment, focus new investment on this corridor, but how are we going to address the patches that it's going to create in our community where people are upgrading, essentially, and trying to relocate closer to transit. On the housing side, it's really important to take stock and know what you have, what your universe is. In your community, you most likely have a stock of regulated tax credit housing, old senior 202 housing, public housing authority, public housing units, and private housing, people renting in private housing with Section 8 vouchers, right? All of those metrics are available for you, and it's really important for you to get out in front of when those use agreements on affordability are going to be expiring. It's important to get ahead of that before year 15 of the tax credit period when that has a chance to go market. And it's really important for you to know your funders and your residents to be able to address their needs and who you can bring in to facilitate some of the public-private partnerships you're going to need to reach your most vulnerable residents. I'm thinking of homeless veterans, people aging in place, elderly residents, right? Especially in your inner ring suburbs, you're going to have a lot of people aging in place, and housing them is going to be a challenge. So how do we address this? You need a corridor-wide strategy. None of this can occur in a vacuum. You need to understand the funding universe of the problem you're trying to attack. And a lot of these problems are discrete and very narrowly focused. And the tools available to address these situations are often just as narrowly focused, right? There's a set of competitive money that we should all be going after as necessary to fund developments in our community. And I'm thinking of things like MHFA's 9% tax credit round and their ability to put soft money into deals. But cannibalizing existing resources to kind of focus development in a new area often cannibalizes existing resources if other governmental agencies are not stepping up their funding to meet that increase in housing. So what does that really mean? That means we need to start looking at non-subsidized, additive, affordable housing options to our repertoire of tools to mitigate an affordability crisis. So what does that look like? On the competitive side, you have your 9% LIHTC awards, you have your municipal city soft debt, right? Your non-repayment cash contingent debt. On the non-competitive side, which is where you can start looking immediately, you have your tax-exempt bonds, your 4% as of right LIHTC subsidy. You also have access to affordable housing real estate investment trusts, your Fannie, Freddie products, and other non-tax credit equity. And it's really important that you understand that those financial mechanisms, which I promise I will not bore you with right now, but it's really important to get your hand around that, right? I want to talk a little bit about NOAA, and I have up here listed the Ridgefield warning. We were talking about this a little earlier. A lot of people think they don't have an affordable housing issue in their community yet. If we use the Ridgefield housing example, this is a project across the street from Best Buy's headquarters, where the owner did not make many improvements, where a project was sold, and where rents drastically were increased in order to meet the new mortgage, and lots of residents ended up being displaced. All that to be said, just because at the moment you're not facing increased pressure on people, that pressure is coming once the transit arrives. When people want to live in your communities, that low-hanging fruit, those NOAA properties, naturally occurring affordable housing, are the easiest projects to pick up and displace residents with. They do not come with regulatory restrictions. They do not come with income restrictions. And the ability to get people out is really on a municipality by municipality basis. So that's a cautionary tale. Just to say, as of right now, you may not have an affordable housing problem. It's on the way. It's doubly important you make sure you are serving your current residents and not just your future residents. And that means thinking about things like eviction prevention, just cause eviction procedures, right of first refusal, and other mixed income housing strategies such as density bonuses, air rights, etc. As an aside, is something that we've seen in Buffalo. We had a medical corridor come in where there was essentially nothing. Adjacent to that was a historically disinvested minority community directly adjacent to that, which became the super hot, trendy new neighborhood because everything was brick, everything was old, and the rents were cheap. All of a sudden, Grandma's house, which has been assessed for $35,000 since the 1970s, is assessed at $280,000. All of a sudden, Grandma can't pay her tax bill, and now all of a sudden, Grandma's having to sell her house and leave her neighborhood. The way we've tried to address that in Buffalo is by thinking about an assessment freeze with a geographic focus in order to ensure that in places where new development is being focused, existing residents on the periphery of that are not forced out. Your existing people with low-wage jobs are not being pushed out to make way for doctors who want to live across the street from the hospital. So that's an idea to kind of think about on a go-forward basis. Vacancy pressures and economic pressures are also going to be hitting your small business communities in your town as well. And it's really important that you help navigate the small business financing world for these small enterprises. There are a couple ways of doing this, right? There are a whole bunch of small business focused CDFIs and loan funds. You have the ability as a municipality to help, you have the ability to assume ownership of vacant land and hold for development, either for, instance, for incubators, for maker spaces, for shared office space, for whatever you feel is necessary to address the small business space problem in your city that will be pressured as a result of this. You have the option of doing that. Providing low interest loans, whether you raise that capital yourself with existing municipal funds or leverage that with outside capital. These are all strategies to consider. Now, I have spoken way too long. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Joe, and thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you again for everybody for your time and allowing us the opportunity to speak to you. We are so excited about this corridor and this opportunity, and specifically, I'm excited about the Van Buren, the Van White stop. So Van Buren's in Chicago. So we think this is a really exciting opportunity for a neighborhood and really to create a great corridor for the residents that live there. From an accessibility perspective, we're really excited that there's a lot of control of land. So we view this as an opportunity where it can be a great mixed income, multimodal neighborhood. And when the neighborhood amenities come, it doesn't have to sacrifice affordability, which so often is the case. And we're really excited that there's so much land in the area that it can support future density and bring in more residents and more amenities for the existing residents. So I'm just going to go through recommendations, highlight a couple of our main recommendations, and then hand it off to the rest of my colleagues for the other stations. So just buzzing through these. First of all, on the recommendations front, this neighborhood is currently a food desert, and while improved access to transportation is necessary, the neighborhood also has a severe need for more retail and services that serve the existing residents. So we hope that this line can prove as a catalyst to get those amenities. We heard a lot of discussion about density and view shed and concern about maintaining view shed, and we would strongly advocate that density is the primary focus, that the view shed is managed through street corridors and not through developable land, because we would not want to sacrifice density so that somebody can maintain a view. Then connecting the neighborhoods divided by existing highways. I mean, really, this is a neighborhood that over the course of history has been cut up by 94 and 55, and we view this as an opportunity to really congeal the neighborhood together and create a sense of place that might not be possible without the catalytic effect of this project. And just a couple other items. I think prioritize pedestrian in the street design. Historically, this has been an auto corridor from western suburbs, getting commuter traffic through, and we think it's important that at this time with this project, we need to refocus on the folks who live there in Minneapolis and make the best corridor and neighborhood for them. Lastly, I'll skip through some of these other ones. I think from a climate adaptive design and development standpoint, one of the things we learned here is that this area is on a high water table, and some of the existing housing units are sinking, and we would recommend that this area and station are very proactive with their stormwater management. I think the severe rains are only going to continue, and we think that something where currently having a wetland area might be a negative, we would strongly encourage CPED in the city and all of the stakeholders to really think about how we can turn what would be a potential negative of the wetland into maybe a positive of community area, where we can have some interesting park space and educational space. And then really I want to take the time to just give credit to the CPED plan. Many of our recommendations align with the initiatives currently laid out in the plan, so I just want to give all that hard work some recognition. We love the plan and a couple of recommendations to go along with it. So the last two recommendations that we have and the ones that we would prioritize, first of all, the lane reduction on Highway 55. Olson Memorial Highway is currently best served as a throughput for Western commuters, as I mentioned before, and the street design as it exists today does a significant disservice to the existing neighborhood from a residential perspective. Currently, this road functions both as a barrier for residents between the north and south, and also as a barrier for residents to cross and actually use the new light rail. We feel like this could potentially inhibit the effectiveness of the new light rail as the 3-lane in each direction is designed today. We feel like the 4-lane condition already exists on 55, so there's a precedent for that on the other side of Minneapolis, and the throughput functions well. And we believe strongly that an amended street design, and this is a photo of University in St. Paul with 2 lanes in each direction. We feel like an amended street design could really function to create a much more mixed-use walkable neighborhood and connect it to north and south portions of the area. And then lastly, a review of tools attracting retailers. This is a neighborhood that is in dire need of more service retail that serves the residents who live there. We're a little bit nervous that the market would not fill that void in and of itself, and so we think it's very important that the stakeholders look at the different tools in their toolkit to help push the market in the right direction to bring a grocer, a fresh food grocer, and bring some of those residential necessities that the folks who are living there already need. And really, the implication of no strategy, our concern is that if the stakeholders don't invest in executing in the existing CPED plan, as well as our additional recommendations, is that the corridor would just miss out on an opportunity to create a vibrant mixed-use community, really built to serve the residents who live there, and again, kind of circling back, providing an amazing mixed-use neighborhood that is also really affordable, which is really unique in the world today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to panel member David, who is going to talk about Robbinsdale. Thank you.
And thanks to everybody who's come out this afternoon, and it's really, for all of us, it's a real privilege to be involved in this. We know you guys have all made significant efforts over truly years and given a lot of your own time, and starting off with cliches, Rome wasn't built in a day, so and these communities won't be fully realized in a short span of time. That's what everybody's experienced. I'm focused, I focused my remarks on Robbinsdale, and as a lot of you guys know, there's some real strengths there that are some are obvious and some are more in the fabric. The obvious are the fact that it's a really strong historic street grid, one of the older communities in Minnesota, real streetcar type town. It has an affordable housing stock, very modest pricing that's available and approachable to most people, and obviously a very strong business community, including some concentration of entrepreneurial businesses. All these things are really, really great historic resources that are in place today. Being proactive in their stability, as some of my panel colleagues have pointed out, is critical. And you want to be out front on that. I won't go into detail on it, but I think it's really important for folks, particularly in Robbinsdale, but there are some other opportunities throughout the corridor called opportunity zones, which are a new creation of the most recent federal tax code updates. And why they're important is they create really substantial increased return opportunities for private investment. And it's coming together with its regulations, but it's important to get to know it better and to track the changes that are happening. And it is actually an opportunity for each community that has an opportunity zone to go out and market it to the investment community. I'm McGough, who I work with, is fortunate enough to have a development area in an opportunity zone, and I can tell you, folks just really sort of discovered that in the last couple months, and it's been a game changer in our ability to raise capital for significant projects there. So please look into it. I can't emphasize it enough. And I think at some point in the coming months, ULI will probably have some conversation and possibly a panel on that. We have a couple of significant recommendations that we want you to focus on. One is a challenge, and one is to leverage something in the station area plan that's already come out. The challenge is we would ask that you re-examine the transit hub and the opportunity to grab prior work and make more of it is what I would borrow a label for and call a crossroads initiative. The challenge to re-examine the transit hub is twofold. One is we feel very, very strongly that you need to uncouple the concept of bus circulation with the parking ramp and also the concept of a wrapped residential building. We feel very, very, very strongly that having those three uses together is simply not viable at all. It will, having that bus traffic close to a residential building like that integrated, truly integrated with the building, will add substantial cost. It will add substantial complexity to the project design, the project operations, and actually, as importantly, it will make it much harder to market that building for residences, no matter what income level it is, whether it's market or mixed income or even deeply affordable. And we think it's a bad idea. The good news is we think we have a significant opportunity right now with existing in-place resources. And we're actually advocates of not only preserving, but really leveraging and seeing the opportunity that the Hubbard Marketplace building is. We recognize that there's been a lot of effort to try to make something work there. We think it can work as what it is right now, which is a transit-focused opportunity. I've got some images that will follow, but we think there's an opportunity to really turn it into a transit station, activate the interior for commuters, possibly add some retail that you would find in stations all across the country. And there may even be an opportunity to tap into the character of the business community, small business community in the downtown, and possibly even create some combination of uses on the various floors, possibly have seating areas for the inclement weather, some retail opportunities for grab and go, and even make use of the upper floors as a small business or startup incubator that can later feed the Main Street businesses or Main Street real estate opportunities. The second major initiative concept is this crossroads. The station area development plans speak about wayfinding, street signage, pedestrian improvements. But what I don't think it addresses is the opportunity there to really define some pedestrian corridors and really define some gateway opportunities that channel pedestrian traffic between the city's assets. You're going to have a transit station. You have these great corridors of retail and business opportunity. And in the distance, you also have opportunities at the lake and the trail system. And you really want to show people how to get back and forth and show them as they visit the community, or even those who don't may even live there, but aren't aware of all the resources when new things open up. And of course, the development plans that have been developed the last couple of years talk about more density down on the boulevard. And those are great ideas. You should pursue those, but those are going to be new residents, new customers for businesses, and they ought to know how to get around. And having an initiative in place, like a Crossroads-like initiative, is something that you can not only create public-private partnerships around to engage not only the private businesses but the residents, but you can also have the opportunity of going out and branding this in the marketplace, in the metro, and also work with your other partners to say, hey, there are real reasons why we want to make these infrastructure improvements. And it can be a guideline for actually softening the pedestrian experience in places like the Bottineau Boulevard, which seems to be a real imperative if you're going to knit those development uses together. That's what I've got. I've even also gone over a little bit, so I'm going to turn it over to Cecile to talk about Crystal.
Hi, everyone. I won't repeat the thanks. I'll just say thanks and go from there. We're really happy to be here. So I'm going to talk about what we saw as strengths and opportunities, but then also kind of near and long-term work that the city could pursue. First of all, we just wanted to acknowledge the Strategic City Council. You know, every council is a little different culture in terms of how aggressive they want to be or not be in terms of helping influence the marketplace. And we just wanted to acknowledge the City of Crystal's efforts in terms of the approving the master plan, the new parks master plan, moving forward on getting that implemented, the accessory dwelling units ordinance, and then the streetscaping and traffic calming efforts along Bass Lake Road. That work has started as well. We were a little taken aback when we read that, make the sidewalk more narrow. Then I drove by it yesterday. I went, that's still a really big sidewalk. So it must have been quite enormous. You also have 1 million+ square feet of commercial driving around that. That's been obviously some real great investment has happened in there. It's really attractive. You've got the great new medical office building. You have a lot of good industrial jobs, good paying jobs. And then similar to the Robbinsdale, piece of this is in an opportunity zone. The only thing I would add to what David said is the clock is ticking. That's a 10-year benefit that investors have where they can take capital gains from a sale, and they can invest it in certain opportunity zones. And there's a lot of rules, but you can't really wait a year to find out about that. You have to learn now. So if you're working with Ellers or Springstead, I would urge you to get them in a room. And frankly, for Robbinsdale and Crystal to do that together so you can both learn what it's going to take advantage of that. Because it really is a unique opportunity, and it's going to go away. So we really strongly encourage you to take advantage of that. So we're supposed to have 2 recommendations. I have 4. And they're really not new necessarily. One is to keep going on the Becker Park and redesign. I think that is really important to make sure that there's a really strong connection between the station and the park. It's not just a little path, but it really opens up and invites people in. I know there's some debate along Bass Lake Road about whether or not there should be a restaurant there because nobody wants to give up parkland. But I will say I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. So if you do a commissary, something that really is for park users, it will draw more people into that. And I just think about Lake Calhoun, Lake Harriet, a little different context, but it is an opportunity that would create, it would be attractive to people. And again, the streetscaping along Bass Lake Road, I would just keep that going. Again, as I drove it, as somebody who's relatively new to Crystal, I don't spend a lot of time up here, it really is a gateway. You really have an opportunity to make this a really beautiful place that people are coming into and they'll want to keep coming further into your community. And then the TOD zoning ordinance that is underway right now. I think that is also fantastic that the city is pursuing that. I do know that the city is considering having opt-outs for the overlay district, and all I would say is we don't think that's a really good idea. We think if you're going to do this, you should go for it. Have a vision, make sure that the entire city can benefit from that. But if you just do a piece of it around this park and everything stays the same outside of it, then everything will stay the same. But as people sell their properties or want to redevelop, you want to bring those up to the next level and really realize the vision that you have in place. And then the last one, again, is to determine how to capitalize on the opportunity zone. So those are the top 4. A couple others that I just want to mention too, again, is around the northeast quadrant of Bass Lake Road. I think it's been termed the ugly building on the lower left. We looked at a Google picture of it. Oh, that's not bad. I think it was a really old picture. So this is kind of really old school, and the other pictures on the right are really what something could look like. You know, you have a willing seller or willing building owner of that strip mall, and then the city owns the parking lots on either end of it. So there's a real opportunity for the city to partner with that building owner to realize, again, something really different there that could be beneficial to that owner and the city itself. And then the other thing I have to say is to dream big. I think sometimes we get stuck into what we know, and to really not think about what your city looks like today, but what could it look like? What's it going to take to get there? If you think about anything big that's happened, somebody had an idea and it sounded crazy, and then they went for it. And then there's this domino effect of things happen as a result of that vision. And I would say also be really open, I think we really need to demand beauty as well. People like to live and work in beautiful places. So the work that you're doing in terms of zoning ordinances, design guidelines, there's a way to be reasonable so it's not too burdensome, but you also need to have a vision and make sure developers help you achieve that vision. And that might mean that you participate in a different way than you're used to doing. Maybe it's getting a new development or resource tool. Maybe it's acquiring land and selling it for $1, whatever it might be. But just think differently of how you can help developers help you get what you want. I think the other thing too is I've heard people talk about some other inner ring suburbs who have done similar work, like Richfield and St. Louis Park. So I would encourage you to rent a bus and get on a bus, take your policymakers and go see it. And then meet with those mayors and ask what worked, what didn't work. What did you put in your design guidelines or in your TOD zoning that was helpful or was not helpful? What would you do different? People are doing this now successfully, so I would really encourage you to learn from that. And then marketing. You know, one thing is developers don't just come. I was the planning and economic development director for the city of St. Paul. You know, second largest city in the state. Man, it was a lot of work to get out there and market the city. So I would really encourage you to get your collateral together, get your talking points together about why this is a great opportunity, and then go call those developers, give them a tour, and be there for them. Be a resource for them and keep pushing to get them to come into your communities. And then empower staff to educate themselves on how developers make decisions. I mean, I think we make some assumptions about what's a barrier to investment without actually talking to the folks who are making the investment. Ask them, what do you need? What are you willing to do for us? And what do you need from us in order to get what we really are trying to achieve here? But open that dialogue and really pursue. People normally will pick up the phone and talk to you if you ask them. Similarly, Maurice Harris, I see us here from Greater MSP, Regional Economic Development Organization, and I would encourage you also to reach out to Greater MSP in terms of businesses. What are businesses looking for, whether it's industrial or office? What do they need from you as well? There's a lot of people that are a resource to you, and I would really take advantage of using those folks. Then long term, again, you got great industrial jobs here that pay really well. You don't want to lose those jobs. I think the question is whether or not they're in the right place. So we would recommend that you do a real deep dive to make sure that you have a complete inventory of the industrial land that you have. And then start digging in deeper about what you're looking at in terms of reuse of some of that land. What do you know in terms of what the environmental issues may be? What are some resources to potentially clean that up down the road? And then think about clustering some of those industrial uses. So the industrial uses are great. Are they in the right place? Is there another place within the city of Crystal where it might be better to cluster them, can provide the access that folks need, and create new development parcels that are more conducive to folks who are using transit? let's see. I'm trying to read this without my glasses. I'm going to give it up. And then I think this last one about Botno Boulevard. I understand there's been a lot of research. There's been a lot of engineering work about creating a bridge to go across the road there. And I understand that that's apparently right now not feasible. I don't think we should give up, though, and figure out a way to make that a really safe, inviting pedestrian crossing there. You've got a lot of folks that are across the street that live over there. You want those people to come to the other side to use that park and then continue to use the retail as well. There's a lot of best practices out there. There's designers and planners that are always thinking of fantastic ways to get people to safely cross streets. It may be something even of reducing the speed for a mile or half a mile within that intersection. But I would just start imagining how can you get the traffic to slow down so that that is not such an intimidating road to cross. And then the only other thing we're going to talk about was what do you do if you don't take any action? There's market challenges that were identified in the master plan. Those are going to stay there. So nothing's going to change unless there's some proactive activity to try to mitigate some of those challenges. And I don't think that you're going to have developers that will put Crystal on their radar. I just don't think that will happen. And I think the retail sector will continue to evolve. And I think if you don't start thinking about what's next for the retail sector, I think I missed it on this slide, but one of the recommendations was that you do a master plan around the commercial district of the Crystal Shopping Center and Town Center, is that the other one's called? To just see what's it going to look like in the future. If retail continues to devolve in terms of bricks and mortar, be ready for a reuse of that site. So you're not left with a swath of vacant land, but that you keep encouraging it to the extent that you can, and hopefully it will continue for many decades to come to be successful. But if it's not, be prepared and get tools in place, or ideas at least in place, so you are ready to be responsive to new market opportunities. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan.
So we all weighed in on each of these station areas, but I get the chance to talk to you about the best station area with the most opportunity along the entire line. So a couple quick things. There's been great planning work done already. This is the Brooklyn Boulevard station in Brooklyn Park. To set the stage for transit-oriented development here, the TOD zoning passed this summer. There's been great emphasis on pedestrian access, both as I understand it from the project design, but also from the city in terms of connecting neighborhoods and doing demonstration projects, which is really key. This site has some great opportunity on all four corners around the transit station, the planned transit station. They're large sites with single owners, so with a few owners, there's an opportunity to work on some fairly large portions of the community. And this, we believe, is a short-term opportunity. This doesn't have to wait for the light rail. It's a regional commercial draw with the retail that's there now. Nationally, there's moves to redevelop retail centers to have them be more mixed use, and that applies regardless of light rail, and so that's an opportunity you can move on now. And so the work on redevelopment and walkability is something we encourage you to work on right away. A couple of recommendations. The station, as you know, will be in the middle there, but there's really four distinct quadrants around that intersection. Think about each of those quadrants as a walkable quadrant on its own, and think about it being walkable internally, mixed use internally, then with strong connections to the transit station itself. As I mentioned, there's some key property owners, and key properties engage those property owners, and a couple other folks have said this as well, but it's true here as well. Be in conversation with developers who are doing the kind of development you'd like to see come here, and ask them what they're looking for, what kind of barriers they see, what would change their perception of barriers. Once you get movement on one of those quadrants, we urge you to really lean in and make it work. And that means doing more on the first redevelopment project as you might do on the other corners, to make sure that you get the development form right and you get the walkability right. So don't be afraid to really lean in and help make that first corner go. Look for leverage where the city has leverage to help get the kind of development it wants, and also as a city be ready to partner. That includes being a partner that can do the kinds of changes the developer might want to see, but also bring money to the table, particularly around public realm, which is a very typical thing for the city to invest in. And really key here, because this is auto-oriented, this is an auto-oriented area, push with all of those tools, with leverage, with funding and other things, push for small block sizes. When you look at walkable places, whether they be downtown and urban centers, whether they be small towns or suburban town centers, they all have this common, this small block size, 200 to 300 foot blocks that makes a place very walkable. So that is something that should be a priority as you work on redevelopment. ULI does a lot of research. They happen to have a publication on 10 principles for rethinking the mall that we think applies here. 3 of these 4 corners are some sort of a retail center. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Of those 10 things, I might just highlight, let the markets be your guide as you think about redevelopment. Think holistically before planning parts of the redevelopment, and deliver a sense of community. That's what retail centers are doing these days, is delivering sort of a broad set of products and services and really a sense of community. So take a look at that publication for more. You have some great examples in the Twin Cities where this is already happening, where retail centers are changing. I know the stationary plan looked at the High Lake Shopping Center. This image shows you, the blue shows you kind of the existing shopping center with additional development that came in on the large parking lot there right near transit, so that's a good example. The Midway Shopping Center is a project that I worked on when I was staff at the City of St. Paul. That station happens to be accelerated in its change by a Major League Soccer stadium. You don't need a Major League Soccer stadium to change retail centers. However, before the Major League Soccer stadium came in there, the owner of the retail center and the city worked very closely to accommodate the kind of things the developer wanted. That included site plan reviews, access to environmental cleanup money and other things, while the city got the kinds of things it wanted, like a requirement to do a master plan. You couldn't just redevelop parts, you had to think about the whole site together. So there's ways that the Midway Shopping Center can be a guide. Southdale and Ridgedale, as you know, are adding housing and office into retail to have that mix of uses, so other good examples. Last 2 recommendations for the city. The top 2 things we'd recommend for the city of Brooklyn Park is to be prepared to invest. As I said, it could be subsidy to make that first TOD happen in a way you want to see. For sure, the public right away, again, a very typical thing for a public entity to invest in. And the second I've mentioned, which is to work now, to move now. And that could be on simple things like expanding and continuing the temporary pedestrian improvements that were tried this summer, to working on the shopping center infill, for example. So that's it for the best site station area along the corridor. Next up is Taylor, who's going to talk about the last site.
So thank you all for coming, and I'm just going to go ahead and say that we've been saving the best for last, and I'm going to present about the best station. So Oak Grove, which is also in Brooklyn Park, so there's been a lot of planning already done, and you've accomplished a lot thus far with your TOD zoning, your street grid layout, and kind of setting things up, because currently what's there now is a lot of vacant land and Target North. We are recognizing that you are maintaining your relationship with Target and making sure that they're going to continue to be a partner going forward, and that is definitely a positive and a plus. And then finally, what you're attempting to do is you're creating a miniature city, not a village, not a main street or a small town. It's a miniature city. It's going to be quite substantial, and it's actually pretty exciting. So the idea behind a miniature city and not a small town or village is that you're stopping sprawl, and you're stopping kind of single family homes or singular plots getting chopped up, and instead looking for density, looking for a small city. So we applaud that. The first recommendation is that you brand this station, not only Oak Grove, but also a destination district. So why I think that's important is because this station has the largest amount of open land. And so there's more opportunity here to do interesting things that you can't do at any of the other stations. And so while creating the city, you're going to want to have all sorts of affordable housing. You're going to want to have coffee shops and banks, and then one day also office. You have the opportunity to do things that take up a bigger footprint. So thinking bigger to make this destination district. And so I think a movie theater, virtual gaming halls, F1 racing, adult campsites. The Minnesota film industry is always looking for unique spaces to make really cool films and movies. Spaces for cultural exhibitions, and then something like a STEM learning center, which that is definitely the future. So I think the recommendation is to rebrand the station as a destination district, but to also let targets and also a larger entertainment be the focus of the plan. Also, the station doesn't need to be a priority over your other Brooklyn Park stations. So you've done a lot of work thus far on the station, and when it comes to where do I spend my money, where do I kind of invest more time or energy, or where do I, again, spend money and resources, we would not recommend that you do so here, because the previous station is actually a closer short-term win, we think, than this station. That being said, should your partner Target begin to sell, or if you think that there's going to be some opportunity to take ownership of the land, then we would recommend that. But until that time, you can continue to work with Target and letting them continue to own it. And our final recommendation is, again, make it easy for Target to say yes. So Target is a large corporation. They're homegrown. They do develop their own retail stores, but they have a different timetable than, say, development, than a transit line, and then a city. So when they come around, when it becomes on their front door and they're ready to move, be prepared to make it easy for them. So your planning work has been done, and that's great, but try and get together the resources that you're going to need to court developers, that you're going to need to implement the actual plan, so that when Target comes back around, you can just say, hey, here's what we're thinking, and they can just say, oh wow, there's no work for us here but to just pay for something and go, kind of. So make it easy to say yes. So in refining the plan, I would say continue to work with developers, like it's been said, that do what you want to get done there. Have them look it over, have them tell you what they would need to get it done. Keeping in mind that if you ask them, what would you need to get this done today, they're probably going to say, oh, well, there's nothing here, so we would need nothing. But keep it in mind, what would you need to invest in this land when the train is running, when the parking garage is up, when there's more housing? But continue to refine the plan with the help of developers that would come in later and do the work. And then also one tool on top of all the others that have been mentioned is that zoning minimums, if that wasn't included in your TOD, or if there's still opportunity to add that, can prevent things like sprawl, because it makes sure that anything that gets built is a certain height, it's a certain story, it's not a single family home, or not a one-story kind of low-density product. So we'd recommend considering that. And so I'm going to pass it back to Marley to close it out.
Well, I think you can tell there's a lot of enthusiasm, and you don't know how hard I worked to cut them down. I'm sorry we've gone so long. We're eager to hear from you, but there was a lot of competition among them about, oh, my site has the most opportunity. You're overlooking this, you're overlooking that. So we really are enthusiastic about this corridor. We really want you to take the lead and do a lot. What if you don't do anything? It's so tempting for communities to say, oh, the transit will take care of it. It will not take care of it. And the cost of doing nothing, given the market forces, this region has not seen an economic boom like this in decades. And we need to take advantage of it. You don't want to miss the market. You want to use that. It's not all about the train. It is really about the market. and the control that you have. If you lose control, it can go a couple of ways. You can have deterioration of what you've got. If you let the market, if you let things just go downhill and you don't intervene, it gets worse. Or you get displacement because it gets so good the market gets ahead of you and you can't catch up. It isn't good. And the identity goes away, the community loses, the quality of life that's so important to all of us is eroded. It's also really critical timing because of these market forces, because of the changes going on in retail, because of the innovation with public-private partnerships, because of the opportunity zones. There's lots of things now that we haven't seen before that really bear your attention and need your leadership. You heard a lot of repetition and themes because we work together that way. Let me try to sum it up with some specific ideas. We really want you to think of this as a corridor. Think of this blue line extension, the Botno corridor, as a neighborhood. And each of the stations is going to serve a different purpose. It should have a different personality. You might go to one station to go to the movie and have entertainment. You might go to another station for education. You might go to another station because there's a beautiful park there. You might go somewhere else to shop. You might go somewhere else to walk around downtown and go to dinner or something. So you want these stations to be complementary. And think about the travel. It won't be everybody going to downtown to work in Minneapolis. It's going to be people going up and down the corridor to suit and meet their needs. If you think about it and you're intentional and you plan together. I really commend the BTIC for the work they've done and the collaboration among the jurisdictions that really needs to continue. We would love to see the BTIC group go en masse to the Revolution Conference. This is a conference that's in about its 15th year. And it's the only conference in the country that's around land use and transportation and transit-oriented development. It's the best networking you can get for the kind of developers, the other communities around the country that are working with issues, to look at the technical things. And just as importantly, it's an opportunity for your communities to work together and come up with collaborative ideas and help each other. None of you were big enough to do it yourself. You shouldn't do it yourself. You really should be working together. And then you'll work on the individual nodes in each of the stations, but think first as a corridor. Along that line, we'd really love to see you have a comprehensive economic development strategy. And if that takes a person, a shared person somehow to help implement it, maybe that's on the list. You also need a shared housing strategy to take care of the housing issues and the displacement issues. And again, if there was a person, there's been a precedent for that already on the Southwest Corridor. If there's somebody that can do that, all the better. Think first about jobs. We know the most sustainable communities over time have a very strong jobs basis. This tends to be a big retail corridor, but you need jobs of different types at different pay levels, not all just retail jobs. And to do that, you need a lot of education and training. We're very enthusiastic about the institutions we see, but really think first about jobs. When we talk about talking to developers, we use developers as shorthand, but you want to think about users. Who can we bring? Who are the companies? What are the companies? What kind of companies do we want? What kind of clusters can we build in our community that makes it different? So think really hard along that line, and then how do we provide this wonderfully diverse workforce to those companies to attract them? Really get ahead of the change. I talked about this earlier. Walk to coffee is the most valuable real estate of any kind. You need to be creating those places now and get ahead of it. You can drop the transit in, you'll plan for it, you'll have the corridors, you know where the stations are, and so on. Think about investing in a demonstration project. This is really a lot about the tipping point. You know, you need one thing. It seems like nothing happens for a long time, long time. And then one thing happens, and that could be your demonstration project, or something just comes out of the blue. And then 2 or 3 things happen. And then all of a sudden 5 things happen. And then you're saying, stop, I can't keep up with it. You're ahead of me and you've lost control. And we really sense that urgency for you. Don't be humble. Tell your story. Brag about your community. Get aggressive on the economic and the development and the marketing side. You heard that from several panelists. But this whole corridor is special, and it's the opportunity corridor. You should be proud of it. And then set the table and take the lead. The private sector expects you to. They need you to. You don't want... I worked on a project. It was a failed regional mall, boarded up and so on. There was a small community, 30,000 people, and a blue-collar community. So the city manager and the city council did what every town tends to do. They did an RFP to developers to see what the developers would do with this 55-acre site. It was overwhelming. They didn't know what to do. Well, guess what? They got 12 proposals, and they were all for the same thing. They were all big box centers that were going to fail. And they were ugly, not pedestrian, and a total waste of this property that originally had been a city park in the city. They'd given up the park for the regional mall. The regional mall failed, and now they were going to get an ugly big box center. Luckily, they had a rail line, a new rail line. It was the first line in Denver that was coming. And we used that to build a new village. But the difference was the city took the lead and said, this is what we want. We don't want big boxes. We want walkability. We want these uses. We want housing. We want a civic center. We want arts. We want this. They set out this vision, and there was flexibility. That's what the developers need. You won't know which developer to talk to or which company to recruit. You won't know where to invest your money if you aren't setting the long-term vision. You don't want just short-term profits for the private sector. And we really urge you to step up, be proud, and take the lead right now. Make the difference. So with that, I'm going to once again thank the Community Works, thank the McKnight Foundation for making our work possible. You'll get a lot more detail in the written report. We edited this quite a bit. And you can look for that in a month or so. And now we really welcome your comments and your questions. If you're not totally burned out and ready to go home. Yes?
Oh, I'll just ask a quick one about Robbinsdale. I heard about the analysis, and there was, at the bottom of one slide, it said electric buses, but then they weren't. Oh, you want me to talk louder and speak up?
Stand up, please.
Okay, I can be heard. Nobody's worried about that. Anyway, on the Robbinsdale slide, there was at the bottom, the discussion of the buses and everything. At the bottom, there were 2 words.